Hello and welcome to Shikara Academy's UPSC Mains PYQ series. In this series, we are discussing all the UPSC GS Mains questions asked by UPSC over the past few years. Now, with today's session, we will be starting the 2023 GS papers, starting with GS paper 1. So, in today's session, we will be discussing about the 2023 GS paper 1, question number 5 to question number 1 to question number 5. Starting with question number 1. Explain the role of geographical factors towards the development of ancient India. A simple, straightforward 10-mark question that we have to answer in 150 words. Now, mapping it with the syllabus, we can see that it has been asked from the subject of Indian history, Indian heritage, and culture. Particularly, the question is asked from the topic of ancient history. Okay, so it is a very applied question. Okay, it is not a direct question, it is quite an applied question from the ancient history, and it is telling us to explain the role of geographical factors. So, what geographical factors, the role played by geographical factors in determining or development of ancient India. So, the approach that we'll be taking in such a question, that starting with the introduction, we will be writing about the role of geography. Okay, in introduction, we give a brief introduction to the answer. Please note that if it is a 10-mark question, the introduction and conclusion should be very brief, 1 to 2 line maximum. Okay. Then in body, we mainly address the demand of the question. And what is the demand of question? Demand of the question is that we have to write the role of geographical factors. That means what major influences was there. So major geographical influences we have to discuss in the body of the answer. Then in conclusion, we will be summarizing the answer in just 1 to 2 lines. Okay. Now, starting with the introduction, geography played a crucial role in shaping the history, culture, and economy of ancient India. Okay, so all the three determinants, that is the history, the culture, as well as the economy, the geography played a role in shaping all these three. Its diverse physical features, it means India's. So, India's diverse physical features and climate conditions influence settlement patterns, agriculture, trade, and political developments. Okay, so we know that India's physical features are very diverse, starting from Himalayas and mountains to to river plains to plateau to coastal region, as well as the desert region. So India has a very diverse physical features across its landscape. Then the climate conditions are also influenced by these geographical features. So these features as well as climatic conditions, they joined, or they both of them together, they influence the settlement patterns across the subcontinent, the agriculture, the trade, as well as the political developments, and how that will be seen in the body. So, major geographical influences include the river systems. So, we had major river systems such as Indus, Ganga, its tributaries, Yamuna, we have the Brahmaputra. So, all these rivers and their major tributaries, they provided a very fertile alluvial plains. Okay, and these alluvial plains were mainly used for agriculture, and this has led to a rapid rise in population in these areas. Okay, so till now we can see that these fertile alluvial plains of Indus, Ganga, Brahmaputra, they are highly populated, it has a very high population density, this entire region. This enabled agricultural surplus, supporting urban centers like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. Okay, if we take the example of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, both of them are located in the Indus River system. Okay, then there is Himalayas and the natural barriers. So Himalayas, they protected India from invasions from the north. Okay, so Himalaya was our shield, is our shield, and will also remain our shield for the in the future as well. And it prevents various invasions from the north, especially the invasions from the Chinese kingdoms or the dynasties from the Tibetan side or from the Central Asian side. Okay, so till many millennia, the Himalayas, they have been a protective barrier and which prevented invasion into the Indian subcontinent. And the snow-fed rivers. Okay, so Himalayas also were the sources of these rivers. So these snow-fed rivers sustained perennial water supply. Okay, so Himalayas played a dual role. First, the protection. Second is the availability of fresh water. Third is the monsoon climate. So seasonal rains supported agricultural cycles across the country, and it determined the cropping patterns and food security. And till date, it supports or it the monsoon determines the cropping pattern in the country. Then there are coastal areas, eastern and western coasts. In India, we have in the peninsular region, we have the western coast, we have the eastern coast. So they promoted maritime trade with Mesopotamia, Rome, and Southeast Asia. So eastern coast was mainly used for trade with Southeast Asia, and the Mesopotamia and the trade with Mesopotamia and the Roman Empire was mainly dealt with the western coast. Fishing, seafaring contributed to economy and cultural exchange. Now, this trade also led to cultural exchange. It boosted the economy and helped in cultural exchange. The fishing community in the ancient India was also, they were using these coastal regions. Then there was Deccan Plateau and the minerals. So Deccan Plateau we know is rich in minerals like iron and copper, which aids in tool making and trade. Okay. So minerals they were used, especially the iron, they were used to make tools and in the trade. And it served as cultural link between North and South India. Okay, so this Deccan Plateau is the link between the northern plains as well as the southern India. Then, in conclusion, for a very impactful answer, you can also draw a map of India and highlight these various physical features. You can highlight, Himalayas in the north, then the uh, northern plains, the coastal regions, the Deccan Plateau, and just make a label of the things that they contributed. So that will fetch you a mark more than the competition. Now, starting with the conclusion, thus we can conclude or we can summarize the answer. Okay, we have to just summarize the answer by writing that thus India's geography not only sustained human life, okay, Indian geography sustained human life, it also encouraged agriculture prosperity, cultural integration, and trade networks, making it a cradle of one of the world's oldest civilizations. Okay, so it is the geography. So we are linking geography with the civilization. Moving on to the next question, that is question number two. What was the difference between Mahatma Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore in their approach towards education and nationalism? Now, this type of questions UPSC has been asking. So they, sorry, so they ask about different personalities of the freedom struggle and their views regarding nationalism, their views regarding education, their political views, and all this thing. So it is a 10-mark question that we have to answer in 150 words. Mapping it with the syllabus, we can see that it has been asked from modern Indian history, and the topic is significant personalities. That is, both Mahatma Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore were very influential personalities during the freedom struggle. Then, starting with the approach, in introduction, we will be writing about Mahatma Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore, just a brief line about both of them. And in body, we address the demand of question by writing their approaches towards education and their approach towards nationalism. Okay, Mahatma Gandhi's approach towards education, Rabindranath Tagore's approach towards education, then Mahatma Gandhi's approach towards nationalism, and Rabindranath Tagore approach towards nationalism. So these will be the four sub parts of the answer. Then in conclusion, we will be summarizing the answer. So starting with the introduction. So Mahatma Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore were two towering figures in the modern India. Both these towering figures, that is Mahatma Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore, they valued education and nationalism, but their approaches reflected distinct philosophies. Now, this is our connecting line. Wherever possible, okay, if the word limit so permits, it is a advisable thing that you write a connecting link connecting the introduction with the body. Okay, so first line will be our introductory line in the introduction, and the second line will be a connecting line. Now, their approach towards education. So Mahatma Gandhi, he advocated for the basic education. That is Nai Talim. Nai Talim means the basic education, combating craft, character, and self-reliance. Okay, so Mahatma Gandhi's vision for education was mainly based on craft, character, and self-reliance. He believed education should be rooted in Indian culture and linked to productive work. Rabindranath Tagore, on the other hand, he emphasized liberal and holistic education at the Shantiniketan. And he stressed freedom of learning, creativity, and harmony with nature. Mahatma Gandhi's approach, their approach towards nationalism. So Gandhi saw nationalism as a moral and spiritual struggle for Swaraj through truth as well as non-violence. Okay. So Mahatma Gandhi's idea of Satyagraha, we know. So the two pillars of Satyagraha was truth and non-violence. And Mahatma Gandhi focused on mass mobilization, that is, and unity against the colonialism. See, he want every movement as a mass movement. He led many of the mass movements against the Britishers. Rabindranath Tagore, on the other hand, he criticized aggressive nationalism as narrow and divisive. Okay? And Rabindranath Tagore advocated for universal humanism, promoting India's cultural identity by embracing the global harmony. So, in conclusion, we can summarize the answer by writing that while Gandhi rooted his idea in practical action and moral struggle, Tagore emphasizes creativity and universalism. Their differences complemented each other. Okay, they had differences in their approach towards education and nationalism, but their differences complemented each other, and both enriched India's discourse on education and nationalism. Okay. So, one thing when writing such an answer in which you have to compare the views or the approach of the different celebrities, try not to side with any of the celebrities. Okay, do not try to demean or uh, some other personality if you are not even um, if you do not feel the second person's views as right, but you have to restrain your words. Okay, if you have to be critical, then choose your words very wisely. Okay, and if possible, don't be that critical of the historical personalities in the answers. Then moving on to the question number 3, that is bring out socio-economic effects of the introduction of railways in different countries of the world. Now, it is a 10-mark question that we have to answer in 150 words. So if you read the question carefully, it is asking about the socio-economic effect of introduction of railways in different countries of the world. Okay. Please note that the answer should not be limited to India only. Okay, because it is asking about the impact that introduction of railway had on the social economic impact of introduction of railways on the different countries of the world. Okay, how the introduction of railways in the 18th century or in the 19th century in different countries affected their socio-economic uh, fabric. Okay, so mapping it with the syllabus, it is asked from the world history, and the broader topic is the industrial revolution, because under the industrial revolution comes the topic of introduction of railways. Okay, you should not limit your answer to India only in such a question. Now, the approach that we'll be taking in writing such a question, in introduction, we will be describing the invention of railways. Okay, so how railways were introduced. Then in body, write the demand of the question, that is the economic effects as well as the social effects. Okay, we'll be writing about the economic effects of introduction of railways and the social effect of introduction of railways by giving examples across different countries. And then in conclusion, we will be summarizing the answer. Starting with the introduction, the invention of railway in the 19th century. So the railways were invented and introduced in the 18th century. It revolutionized transport across the world. It accelerated industrialization, transformed societies, and reshaped global economies. Okay. So what was the main impact? That it accelerated industrialization, and in a way, the invention of railway was the need of industrialization, because the finished goods or the raw materials need to be carried over far over places on the land, and railway is a very good means of transport in order to transport heavy materials or the raw materials, the finished goods or the industrial goods from one place to another. Then it also transformed the societies and reshaped the global economies. And how it reshaped the society and global economies, that will be seeing. So what are the economic impacts? First is the industrial growth. So railways enabled quick transport of raw materials and finished goods. that boosting industries in Britain, USA, and Germany. Okay. Second is the agricultural expansion. So farmers gained access to distant markets. For example, wheat exports from the American Midwest and cotton from India increased. Third is the rapid urbanization. So growth of towns and industrial hubs near railway junctions stimulated employment and commerce. Fourth is the global trade. It connected ports with interior. So ports are a major site of the global trade, but the railways, they connected ports with the hinterland or the interior regions of any country. And this enhanced international trade and colonial exploitation. Okay. For some countries that enhanced international trade, but in the case of India, it led to further economic or colonial exploitation. Now, apart from the economic effect, what were the social impacts? So first is the mobility and migration. So it facilitated movement of people for work, leading to cultural exchange and social integration. Okay, along with the urbanization, that also lead to migration. Second is the communication and unity. In countries like India, railways helped integrate diverse region and fostered the political consciousness. Okay, so especially in India, so railways integrated diverse regions because people from diverse regions, they travel in the same class of or in the same compartment of railways, and their political ideas, their political consciousness were exchanged. There were exchange of political ideas. There were and a spirit of nationalism. So it is said that the introduction of railways in a way led to an increase in the sentiment of nationalism across the country. Then is the standard of living. So the cheap transport made goods more accessible to the common people. So transportation cost of the goods has come down because of the railways. Now, in conclusion, we can summarize that the introduction of railways reshaped societies worldwide by driving economic growth and fostering social change. That means railways symbolized modernity, linking local economies to global networks while transforming everyday life. A simple general conclusion. Then moving on to the next question, that is question number 4. Discuss the consequences of climate change on the food security in tropical countries. Okay, it is also a very applied question, 10-mark question that we have to answer in 150 words. Okay, now it has been seen that over the years, UPSC has been asking more applied questions or more indirect questions in the GS mains. Okay, so mapping it with the syllabus, we can say that it has been asked from the subject of geography, but no clear cut, okay, topic is there. So we can say that it has been asked from the salient features of world physical geography because climate change can now be considered as a feature of the world's physical geography. Okay. Now, the approach that we'll be taking in answering such a question is that in introduction, we describe the climate change. Okay. Then in body, we write the consequences of climate change because the question is asking us about the consequences of climate change on food security and in the tropical country. So it's quite specific question, but is more of an applied question. So it might be a question based on the so it is a question that can also be asked in GS paper 3, that is in the uh, environment part of the syllabus. But now this question has been asked in GS paper 1. That means you have to you have to write this question from a geography paper perspective. Okay. Now, starting with the introduction. So, tropical countries dependent on agriculture and monsoon based climates. Okay. So, tropical countries, there are monsoon based climates. These are highly vulnerable to climate change. Okay. Rising temperatures, erratic rainfall, and extreme weather events directly threaten the food security. Okay. So, here we have introduced by writing about how the tropical countries, which are mainly dependent on agriculture and have monsoon based climate, they are highly vulnerable to climate change. Okay. Because of the climate change, there has been erratic monsoon, there has been erratic rainfall across such tropical countries, and their agriculture is dependent on monsoon. So if the agriculture is dependent on monsoon, we can say that the food security also is depending on the monsoon or the rainfall patterns. Now, rising temperatures, erratic rainfall, and extreme weather because of the climate change. Because of the climate change, we are witnessing these three things. That is, temperatures are rising, there has been erratic rainfall, and there is extreme weather. Okay, all these three are leading to a decline in agriculture, or these are threatening agriculture, and in a way, they are directly threatening the food security. Now, these consequences of climate change, first is the decline in crop yields. So, heat stress reduces productivity of staple crops like rice, maize, and wheat. Second is the changes in rainfall affect the sowing cycles and irrigation. Third, later we have this increased pests and disease. So, there is decline in crop yields because of the high temperatures, the heat stress is there, and the crops that require colder temperatures. Okay, that require a certain range of temperature. If the temperature threshold increases, then the yield and the productivity of such crops come down. Okay, and the change in the rainfall pattern, it affects the sowing cycles as well as the irrigation of such crops. If in many areas the drought-like conditions emerge because of the climate change, okay, so in such regions there should be increased or there more resources are spent on irrigation. Then there is increased pests and diseases. So warmer climates, they favor the spread of pests, fungi and crop diseases. So the crop pathogens and the pests, they thrive more in warmer conditions or in the warmer environment. And this led to reduced agricultural output and higher losses. So because of the heat stress, there is decline in crop productivity. Then because of the increased pests and the diseases, crop productivity is coming down, and this both of them leads to higher losses. Third is the water stress. Now, erratic monsoons and droughts reduce the water availability for irrigation. So more and more resources now has to be shifted towards irrigation, and that raises the agricultural cost. And tropical countries like India and African nations face severe risks. Okay, and in India we know that around 50% of India's land, agriculture land, is still rain-fed agriculture. Then there is nutritional insecurity. Lower yields lead to rising food prices and malnutrition, especially among the poor. Fourth is the livelihood impact, that is, small farmers who dominate the tropical agriculture. They suffer income loss, increasing poverty and migration. As we can see in the case of India, we have like around 85% of the Indian farmers are small and marginal farmers. Okay, and they dominate the tropical agriculture, but because of the climate change they suffer income loss, and they are pushed towards more and more they are pushed or they are nudged towards poverty, and ultimately they had to migrate in the urban areas in search of work and employment. Now what conclusion we can write? So in such a cases, because here the problem we have discussed the problem in the answer, so in the conclusion in such a questions, in such an answers, we have to write a way forward for conclusion. If we are discussing problems in the body of the answer and are not and we have not written about the suggestive measures or recommendations in the body of the answer, so in such an answer, in conclusion there should be way forward. You can skip the way forward in a answer if you have already written about the recommendations or the suggestive measures in the body of the answer. So, writing the conclusion, climate change endangers food security in tropical regions by disrupting agriculture, water, and livelihoods. Urgent adaptation strategies like the climate resilient crops, efficient irrigation, and sustainable farming are essential to ensure long term food stability. So, here we have provided recommendations like the climate resilient crops, the efficient irrigation, and sustainable farming is the future. Moving on to the last question, that is question number 5. Why is the world today confronted with a crisis of availability of and access to freshwater resources? A 10-mark question that we have to answer in 150 words. Mapping it with the syllabus, we can see that it has been asked from the topic or the subject of geography, and the topic is distribution of key natural resources across the world. And what is the natural resources the question is talking about? That is the fresh water. So seeing the approach, in introduction, we describe the availability of fresh water in the world. Then in body, we write the reasons for the crisis. Okay, because the question is asking us to discuss why is the world today confronted with the crisis of availability and the excess of freshwater resources. Then in conclusion, because we have discussed about the problem, then in conclusion, we have to give a way forward. So starting with the introduction, fresh water is a vital natural resource, but yet the world is increasingly facing scarcity and unequal access. Okay, world is facing scarcity and unequal access. There is lack to access. Rapid population growth, industrialization, and climate change have intensified this crisis. And this way, we are now connecting it with the body of the answer. So in body, we discuss the reasons for the crisis of the availability of fresh water. That is population growth and urbanization. There is rising demand or high demand for drinking water, sanitation and agriculture. And this has led to over extraction of rivers, canals and the groundwater aquifers. Okay. So majority of the large cities in India, they their groundwater level has come down substantially and they are under water stress. Second is the agricultural dependence. Around 70% of the fresh water is used in irrigation. So irrigation is the most critical factor or is one of the most critical reasons behind the crisis of the fresh water because it is a sector that consumes around 70% of the total fresh water. And in India, especially, we have inefficient practices that led to the wastage and groundwater depletion, like flood irrigation, which is a very inefficient way of irrigating the field. Third is industrialization and pollution. There is discharge of untreated industrial effluents which contaminates rivers, lakes, and even the groundwater. Then the domestic sewage is further without treatment, it is dumped into the rivers and the canals. That further reduces the potability or the that reduces the availability of the potable water. Then there is climate change, which is impacting all the sectors or all the fields of life. That is altered rainfall patterns, melting of glaciers, and frequent droughts reduce the freshwater supply. Then there are extreme weather disrupts water storage system. So it has been seen because of the climate change, there has been erratic monsoon. In some regions, there is intense rainfall in a short amount of time, and that leads to filling up of the reservoirs of the dams. And in order to prevent the collapse of such dams, their gates then needs to be opened, and that leads to flooding in the plains region or in the downstream region. But because of this erratic rainfall, also in some months or some times of the year, okay, the region or the regions across the country they face severe drought-like conditions also. Finally, there are inequitable access. So developing countries face water scarcity due to poor infrastructure and governance. And there has been conflicts over transboundary rivers which worsen the crisis. Because firstly, the reasons for the crisis is that the availability of the fresh water is coming down because of the population growth, urbanization, because of the agriculture, industrialization, pollution, climate change. So these four factors are leading to the decrease in the availability of fresh water. Then if even there is availability, the availability is not equal. Okay, there is inequitable access. So then in conclusion, we write a way forward or we give suggestions by writing that the freshwater crisis is both a problem of availability and management. Okay, it is an issue of availability and management. Sustainable water use, pollution control, efficient irrigation, and international cooperation are crucial to secure future access to the freshwater resources. So the problems that or the reasons that we have discussed, based on those reasons or those problems, we can write one word suggestive measures. That is, we can tackle the pollution. We need to tackle the pollution. We need more efficient irrigation. We need international cooperation in order to make sure that water is available to all. The PDF of these model answers will be available to you on Shikara Academy's Telegram channel. Thank you.